right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Beast Report. I'm your host, Scott Biskobing, and joining me, like always, or most of the time, anyways, the man himself, the hunting beast, Mr. Dan Infalt. How's it going, Dan?
I'm alive.
You're alive. Staying warm out there?
As warm as I can.
Yeah, it's been a little crazy here lately with these temperatures here in the upper Midwest.
We
And
had a
then,
warm spell today. I think
what's
it got
that?
up to 15. I said we had a warm spell today. I think it got up to 15.
Yeah, but then there was like
It's
25,
true.
30-mile-an-hour winds to keep those wind chills like 10 below.
I'm picky.
Yeah, I'm picky. I'm over it. I'm ready for some 20-degree weather, which is what we should have for those workshops coming up. But we'll maybe talk about that a little bit later. But I want to get right into it here tonight because we have a guest with us. We are bringing back or brought back the top five under popular request here from many of you. So tonight we are bringing on the Johnny Stewart. Let's go ahead and bring Johnny on. How are you tonight, Johnny?
Good, Dan. How's it going, Scott?
Real good, real good. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I was just going through. We were reading some of the comments in that, and Uncle Lou chimed in real quick with a pretty good one right off the bat. Johnny is a cold buck killer. If he hasn't killed a buck in like the last 5 minutes, he gets ornery. I once saw him steal an e-bike from a 10-year-old because he hadn't taken a big buck in 2 days.
Oh, geez, Lou. I know what
Classic Lou. So, for those of you that don't know who Johnny is, Johnny, can you give us a little rundown on your background and maybe how you got into hunting and what you're up to these days and maybe what your claim to fame is a little bit?
All right, so I'm 46 years old. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I currently live here now, where I grew up. I've been pretty much fascinated with whitetails, kind of obsessed over them. Probably 35 years since I was a young kid, 10 years old. I remember my dad was just a rifle hunter, and I was remember when he would go out, I couldn't wait till he'd come back. And I remember one time, he is always tell this story. One time he had took me out scouting in an area he wanted to rifle hunt, and he showed me what a buck rub was. And this kind of tells you how kind of obsessed I am. He pointed out some buck rubs, and I remember cutting them down with my penknife and collecting them all. And they were just like quarter-inch, half-inch trees, you know. I was so fascinated about that I took them all home, and I kept them at the house. Mom, like in the springtime, was like, "What are these trees you live?" I said, "Mom, those aren't trees. Those are buck rubs. What are you going to do with them? Save them? I don't know. I just need to." So I think about that story once in a while here, and I'm like, "Wow, there's something wrong with you." But yeah, I hunted in around where I grew up, and it was nothing was deer management or mature hunting, deer hunting. It was just pretty much meat for the table. A big deer was a 2 year old. I got my first buck maybe at 15 with a rifle. Then I got into bow hunting at 14. Well, a buddy got me into bow hunting, and that was man, I was just hooked on that. And it took me a few years to finally harvest a deer with the bow. And then into my teenage years, I started taking more deer, and I got my confidence up, and I kind of started hunting more mature deer. Um, but always being in the woods, hiking in the woods. Probably in through my 20s, I even started doing some out of state hunting. Started with West Virginia and then Ohio, and we went to the Midwest a little bit. And it wasn't all public land hunting; it was just mainly wherever we get permission or someone would let us hunt. But as I got older and I got better, um, I kind of just focused on challenging myself, and to me, that was hunting deer on public land. And for the most part, eastern United States. I mean, kind of northeast, I would say, mountain deer. Would definitely travel to the Midwest some, but I'd say ever since I was 30 was all public land hunting. So 15 years now, and yeah, always spending time in the woods, hiking, and I think in around that 15-year period is I learned a lot. I think people also learned a lot because that's when kind of trail cameras came out, and they were a huge asset. And the one thing that I did was I would study my subject, the deer itself, mature deer. I would kind of listen to other opinions of people, but there wasn't much um, published. It was just hunt magazines and what back then on the deer I was hunting, where I was hunting, and I felt like my best results came from following the animal study and asking questions and just pretty much obsessing over these animals for the last 15 years, and I've had good success, and I took on a job where I worked in the summer and could just hunt all winter because I can't focus. I can't do it's all or none. So I did excavating, and I have an excavation business now that I work through the summer and take the fall off. And I last 2 years I started a YouTube channel, the Johnny Stewart, and take a cameraman with me. And this is my third year of that, and even this year had a lot of luck. I shot 5 bucks this year in 5 states on public land, and um,
Wow.
yeah, had a great year. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. That's some good information there. If you could maybe bring your laptop in just a couple inches closer. We're getting a little bit of muffled. I just want to make sure it's not you cutting out from your microphone.
Okay, I turned it up a little bit. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, right there you sound good.
Good,
So
good, good.
this whole internet stuff and computer stuff, it's never perfect. But Dan's coming in crystal clear. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. I mean, that's
I hope not vision wise, because if you make me
no.
too, it'll be ugly as hell.
I mean, you're
I got to be.
you're coming in at least 720p right now. So
That's better. Okay. When Johnny was talking, I was thinking about you could hear that want and that desire in his voice, and that's what all killers have. I mean, everybody always asks me, why don't I kill big bucks, or why I can't? Because they don't have that. I mean, the guy's taking the whole fall off just for hunting, and he was collecting the rubs when he was a kid. It reminded me of me. There was just such an obsession with the whitetails.
Yeah.
I agree. And you're over in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, like I said, tonight we're going to go ahead and do. We're going to get back into the top 5 here. So Johnny was nice enough to send us some pictures and put together 5 different hunts that are his favorite. So these aren't necessarily his biggest bucks. These are just 5 of his favorite ones, and that he would enjoy telling the stories to you guys about. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. This first picture I'm going to bring up isn't actually your buck, but you sent me this because this was on a hunt that you were on as well, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go ahead and just bring that up here.
So yeah, this is Bill Thompson, the owner of Spartan Forge. He's a good friend of mine, and we have this hunt is I don't get to hunt with him that much with his busy schedule, but we do get together first week in November and October in Pennsylvania at my hunting camp. Get a lot of guys together and hunting the big woods. You're not always guaranteed success or luck. It's tough hunting there, but on this occasion, he had shot this buck the day before I killed mine, so it was great to have him in camp and harvest his deer, and that was a 10.5-year-old deer.
Wow.
So yeah, he had harvested that deer the night before, and we had a bunch of guys at camp, as we always celebrate, whether we celebrate the deer's life and the hunt. It's just a celebration. Cook up deer heart. Usually have guys over, have some drinks, but so we was celebrating his deer, and we actually stayed up a little bit late that night, and so the next day, I was heading out to hunt, and Bill was just going to tag along with me, get in a tree, and he was going to film me. So we actually slept in a little bit. It was gray light, and I had a spot picked out that was close to the road, since we were getting in late, and it was a spot that we had killed several bucks in the previous years. It was like a big flat with an east-west highway, and with you have the predominant south-southwest wind that kind of blows toward the highway from the south side of the road, and there's a clear cut back in there, maybe 200 yards. Long story short, these bucks would cruise parallel that highway, be downwind of that clear cut, and we've shot several bucks there, and it always seemed like it was hot around the sixth, seventh, and eighth, right? So Bill had shot this deer on the sixth, and I said, "Hey, I know just where to go." And it's like a spot I use, like it's in my back pocket, because I'm always wanting to scout and learn new areas. I think once you learn an area, the sometimes the challenge is over, and it's just a waiting game. You actually can turn your brain off and sit there. To where I like learning and using my brain and figuring them out. That's half the fun of it. So this is a spot I had in my back pocket. So I told Bill, I said, "Let's go. We're going to park on the road. We got about a 150-yard walk into the edge of this cut." And so we get up in the morning, gray light, and I had dropped my bow the day before, and I wanted to shoot it, and I forgot because when he got to camp with his deer, we started celebrating. So it's gray light, and I got to shoot my bow. I said, "Before we go, I got to take a shot." So I shot at 20 yards, and it was like a foot high and a foot right. And the sight, I knew the sight was bent. I don't use that. I forget what type of sight, but the housing was kind of out far, and it was just not a lot of structure there to hold it
Sure.
stable. So you drop it. It was so that's what I'd done. So Bill's like, "Okay, move it," because he's like in a hurry to get to the tree. I said, like I wanted to group a couple arrows. He said, so I moved it, and I moved my sight, took a shot. It was like right in the bullseye. And he's like, "All right, let's go." And I'm like, "All right." So we headed out, parked on a road. We hiked in there about 120, 140 yards, just far enough where you can't see the road. It's a little bit of it goes from a mature forest, the first 100 yards, and then a little bit of a like a 20 or 30-year-old forest, and then the clear cut where the does would be, and then bucks kind of cruised in that 20-year-old, 20, 30-year-old pull timber. So we get up in a tree, and we both felt it. Like Bill's a guy that's intimate with hunting and deer, and has a lot of experience. And I think you kind of get to a point in your career when you're hunting, or that you could just your sixth sense comes on. And you could sense like I'm in the right spot. Like this is it. Like sometimes I've even like hyperventilated. Like this, like everything is right. It feels right, and you just know it's going to happen. It's a matter of time. So we both had a great feeling, and we got in there, and it was nice to have him because he was like the guy with the grunt call and the rangefinder, and I was just trigger guy. So we each got in a tree, and we got to hang out there for a little bit. A doe came out from that thicket, and I think there was a doe that was in heat, and the one came out and headed toward the highway. Like, "I'm getting out of here. I don't want to be bothered." So a little bit later, we saw the doe in heat running, and it had two good bucks behind her, like 120, and the one I shot is maybe 130. And so they kind of ran across in front of us, and Bill Great gave a grunt, and I tried getting a shot, but it was in some thick stuff, right? So they had gone into that cut. They chased her in that cut, and we had a spike come right by us, and Bill had hit the grunt call. Well, here, that big buck, the bigger of the one in the that chased the doe in the cut, heard us grunt, and saw the spike. So he come running right out of that cut, and there he is at 24 yards, quartering toward a little bit, and he's looking at that spike. And so I put it right tight behind his shoulder, and I had to miss like a limb, like the size of my finger. Um, and I shot, Bill filmed it, and the deer had dropped 9 inches at the shot. I didn't really aim low. I mean, he was alert. I didn't grunt or anything, but he had dropped 9 inches, and the arrow went in high. And I said, "Oh man, 3, 4 inches below the spine." I'm like, "Oh, November 7th, last thing I'm gonna do is hike around in the forest, look for this deer all day."
Yeah.
So Bill's replaying the footage, and he's like, "Man, I don't know." He slowed it down. There was like blood that came out right when you shot. I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I heard a crash over there." I said, "Yeah, the last 5 track jobs I've been on, I heard crashes, and we 3 miles into the track, we never found nothing." So
Yeah.
We get down, we wait a half hour, we get down and we go over there. My broadhead, which I never use, I used a Schwacker. I don't know why I put it on. I think it was Bill's broadhead I borrowed that day. It was the morning was pretty hectic, or I don't know where it came from, but it actually nicked that tree. I mean, like if it was a quarter inch to the left, eighth inch, it probably would have really hit that tree and spun the arrow, but it just barely grazed the bark of the tree, hit the deer high. But what had happened, we didn't know. Um, at the impact, it was high, but it angled down. That broadhead hit angled down, but we got down. We seen blood, and we had no clue what the outcome was. And we were following decent blood for 100 yards, and Bill looks up, and the deer was laying there dead. So it was one of the times like a mishap actually worked out. It went in kind of high and deflected. I'm thinking just like where the back strap sets on the like part of the spine that comes down like that. I think it deflected straight down like I was right up in a tree. So it was actually like a double lung hit, like straight down. So it was like a hunt that like I thought that we were going to be hiking all day looking for that deer, and it turned out for the good, the deflection, and there he was 100 yards. And that deer was 7.5 years old. Um,
Wow.
so between the two deer we shot on those
Yeah.
2 days, 18, 19-year-old, like it's pretty hard to believe. And I know younger when I was growing up, everybody said, oh, they don't make it past 3 years old. But I mean, I've been hunting all the deer I shot this year were over 5+, 8, 9. I'm hunting a lot of more mature deer. So it's pretty awesome. It's a great hunt to share with Bill. He's a good friend of mine, and I think that's just kind of why I threw that one out there. It's a memorable hunt for me, and spurred a moment hunt, and to get two deer back to back at that age was pretty remarkable.
There's another look at it here.
Yeah, it's some good mass. Heavy deer. I mean, we don't weigh him, but I mean, we had to go 200 yards, and it was a good drag to get him. He might have been 200. I don't know. But he was a big bodied deer. That was a fun hunt.
Yeah, that had to be a little nerve wracking though, having only taken one extra shot, and getting that one in a bullseye.
Yeah,
I'd be wanting to take at least two more,
I know.
and
They're like, let's
then
go.
make sure it wasn't just dumb luck.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking. But he's like, let's go. So I'm like, all right, let's roll.
Oh man, anytime I feel like my equipment isn't right, I'm a nervous wreck in the tree. Like it's one of those things we talked about when you don't have confidence in the spot that you're in, the
Yeah.
day, all those different things. I mean, it can just completely screw up your mind
Hmm.
for that entire set, and then a lot of times it can end up screwing up your hunt. So good on you for keeping it focused there, and then you were using a broadhead you never even used too.
Yeah, it was expanded Schwackers, and I don't like them, but yeah, I don't know why. Maybe it was Bill's broadhead, or like I said, it was a pretty hectic morning, and needed to get in the woods. We were late.
Yeah, I mean they do. I tried them once many years ago, and they do fly real nice. I just haven't been impressed. I've killed a couple deer, but I haven't been impressed with the blood trail with them.
And I shot
So yeah.
one last year with it, and it hit high, and it deflected straight down. It didn't even. It went. He ducked the arrow, and he probably would have went through the back straps, but it hit high and it deflected straight down between the ribs and the scapula. Like
Wow.
I mean, you can see on video, it goes like this, straight down. So I don't ever use them. I guess if you could hit them right between the ribs or right in the heart every time, but you don't never know. I
You
don't.
had X-ray vision, yeah, and you can know exactly where those ribs
I'll get
are.
hit quarters maybe, but that's not me. So
Yeah. All right, Dan, did you have any other thoughts on that one before we move on to buck number 4 here? Or I guess it would be buck number 2. We're working our way up to 1 here, folks. So that was buck number 5.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
ready for number 2.
All right.
So this one is man, this is back when I started hunting public land. I was probably about 15 years ago. This was in Ohio, some area that's kind of rugged. And I think I had maybe 2 or 3 cameras back then. And I'd go up in the mountains and put them out. And I remember having this deer on camera. And so I didn't get down to that area till mid-November. And I remember getting down there and going up over the mountain and hunting kind of the windward side of the mountain and getting in a tree. It was there was a hurricane somewhere south, and we were getting like the remnants of the wind in that like left
Mhm.
over. And I remember I had a couple days, and then it was going to be calm, and I thought the hunting would get good when it calmed down. But I remember being up, going up over the mountain and on a windward side, and I remember sitting by a scrape, and I remember sitting there, and a doe came through, and that's all I saw that morning. And then these two dogs come running through, and they shit right in my scrape. So actually, I forgot about that part till I talked to my buddy today about that story, and he reminded me. But anyways, didn't see much there that morning, that day, and I had worked along that ridge, and I remember there was a low gap in that ridge to where I think the bucks were crossing. I didn't have no cameras. I just had like an inventory camera from I put it out maybe in the summer, and I don't know when I grabbed it, and that was what I used to do, just run a couple cameras, and then you would hunt. And that's about what I do anymore now. Just get inventory on what's there and just use your knowledge of deer and deer hunting and hunt. So that's what I did, and I remember working toward that low gap, and there was rubs just below the ridge. I think them knife ridge, them narrow ridges. I think a lot of times them bucks don't really like to walk the very top, but just down over maybe 20 feet to where their body is like concealed, and then maybe they could see across that ridge. But there were some rubs along there, and then there was that saddle. So the next day, and I had an old Summit, not old, but the hand climber, the Summit. That's what I used to use, and I'd carry that thing everywhere. But the next day, I went and got in that saddle, right on the very top of the saddle, looking down the windward and the leeward side, and it was so windy. I just couldn't sit there. I mean, it was beating that hillside up. So I dropped down on the leeward side, maybe 60 yards just to get out of the wind. I got my Summit down there, maybe about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, and I get up in the tree and I get settled, and I look out in a greenbrier, and I see a horn laying in a greenbrier about 20 yards from me. Uh, Half of a 10, looked like a 2-year-old, good time length, right? So I sat there and I'm looking up the hill toward that saddle. I'm out of the wind, and I had seen a good deer behind me, maybe a 130, high 20s, 130-inch 10 that I didn't want to shoot because just from my camera, I knew there was some good deer in the area. Sat there all day, and the wind that had died down on that windward side, maybe an hour or so before dark. And I looked at that saddle 20 minutes before dark, and here come that deer. He come up over that saddle, and the sun was shining on his horns. I said, "Holy shit, that's got to be a 170-inch deer." It was just glowing, and that rack come over. But when he crest that ridge and he come down, he ended up going like this way. He might have been 50, 60 yards from me. There was no way I can get a shot. He was constantly moving. I did a grunt in that. So the next day, I said, I'm going to get up, get in that saddle. So I remember next morning getting my stand. It was at the bottom of the tree, that Summit, and getting up in that saddle. And I'm just looking down the ridge, and the windward side's down to my left. But now it's calm. The wind's done. The storm's passed. And I figured it was going to be a good day, probably like November 10th, 8th, 12th, somewhere in that time frame. I don't exactly remember, but I looked down the hill 80, 100 yards, and I saw the buck. That big buck was down there chasing a group of does, and I grabbed the bleat can and the grunt and threw everything at him, and the only thing I called in was a pack of does, and they come up from behind me, and they're standing all around me, and I just couldn't move. They were looking for, like I said, I hit that bleat can for a doe, and so I'm looking out that ridge line, and I guess the buck had chased those doe, and maybe they weren't in heat, so he was kind of out of sight for a few minutes. And then off that main ridge, there was just like a little finger ridge that went toward that windward side, and all these does are around me, and they're just like standing around looking. They're looking for this other deer, and I'm looking around, and I could just see that buck's rack behind that little finger ridge, and he was just walking toward the main ridge like this. I saw his rack. I said, "Holy shit, there he is." He got almost to the main ridge, and he turned and he just paralleled that ridge, and he gave a big old, he went, "Bruh," big old deep roar grunt. And he came, he saw those does under my stand, and he ran right toward them does. So here he comes flying at these deer, and I got my bow back, and he come to 8 yards, and I just hollered at him or grunted at him, and he had stopped behind a cedar. There was one cedar, but it was like, here's his body, and like here's the cedar. Like it was right in front of his body. I was like, I'm shooting through that. It wasn't like a big limb or something. So I shot through it, and he took off, and he went back the way he came, and I could see him stop out there, and it was like a liver, you know, maybe last rib, livers, maybe some stomach. And he went slowly down the hill, and I backed out. I went all the way down to the park, and it was in the morning, 9, 10 o'clock. I said, well, I'm going to give him a few hours. So I went back down to the parking lot, truck, this and that. And I went back up there, and I got on his blood, and there was a little bit of blood. And he didn't go far. He went maybe 150 yards, and I could tell he was hurt. You know, he couldn't walk straight down the hill. He had to just like zig. You know, he was really hurt, and so I gutted him, and instead of going back up the top of the mountain, the ridge, and down to the vehicle, because I was down over that windward side a good bit. I had the bright idea that I was going to take him down to a creek. I already had this planned out. I was going to take him down to the creek and drag him to a road. So this is before Spartan Forge app, mini mapping app, um, and so I couldn't drop no pins or anything. So I just knew I knew where I was when I was in the woods. I was on that little finger below that, and what I did was, once I found him and got him, I went back up over the hill, got in my truck, and drove around the front of the mountain to a road where I could see that ridge line. I left the deer in the woods. I said, okay, there's that ridge, there's that saddle. Okay, my deer's laying up there. Like I'm looking from a main road, looking across on this mountain. That's where he's at. So by now it's getting dark, and I had parked, and I had to go up that creek to parallel that mountain, maybe half, 3/4 of a mile, and then I can go straight up the mountain to my deer. So I started in the woods with my little headlamp. That's all I had. And I walk in, and it was weird. The creek kind of like did a weird turn, like it turned into the road. So like when I went in, I couldn't go like perpendicular to the road because the creek kind of went back along the road. So I kind of followed the creek, and I went in so far, and I was walking for about 5 minutes, thinking I'm paralleling the creek and heading up the hollow. Here I did a circle, and I walked back out on the road. I'm like, oh man, it's going to be a long hike. I got lost in 100. And I had a border collie, a dog that he went with me everywhere, and he would just live in my truck. So he was with me. So finally, we stuck tight to the creek, went all the way up that drain, up that mile, 3/4 mile, and we head up the mountain to where the deer was. And like I said, I just got that little headlamp, and I couldn't find my deer. I'm walking up and down the mountain. Finally got to where I shot the deer and followed the blood trail down. I got him, drug him down to the creek, drug him all the way out, drug half the hide off him. I think I got out at like midnight, 1 o'clock, right? And drove all the way home. It was a long trip, and I think like 2, 3 in the morning, I stopped at a gas station or truck stop, and I slept in my truck. I get back the next day, and that was before you had to, cut them up and butcher them and bring them. You know what I mean? The brain matter and everything. You were allowed to take them home. So I took them home and uh, showed all my buddies, and took them to the butcher or whatever. And I remember like 2 days later, I was going to go hunting, and I was getting all my gear together. I couldn't find my bow. I'm like, where the hell's my bow at?
Oh, jeez.
No.
Like, geez, you know. Then I remember. Then I backtracked my steps here where I was parked. I just, frantic, threw all my shit in the truck. It was dark, whatever, and left my bow laying there. So I called a guy that I knew lived close by. I said, I said, Frank, can you run up the road and see if that my bow's laying? I told him where I was parked, and he called me back. He said, John, there was no bow there, but there was a note on a tree, and a guy found your bow, and he left his phone number, and you know, I'll give you his number. You can call him. So I called the guy, and I had to describe my bow to him. All right, yeah, I got your bow, and he was a logger. They were logging in the area, and so I had gone back down. I guess soon after that, and I bought him dinner, and I wanted to pay him something, but I bought him dinner and a couple beers, and he gave me my bow back, and I was able to drive back to PA and keep it. So yeah, so that was a pretty cool story. And he was a good deer, and the shed I actually found when I was in a tree was his.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that deer was right around 160. It was a 9 point, but it wasn't thick. A pretty good sized deer, but the shed I found was like it was him. It Man, if he made that big of a jump, the shed was probably maybe a mid 20s deer, but it it was laying in that greenbrier, so the squirrels didn't get to it. So I don't know, man, if he made that big a jump. I mean, that was like 30 inches he would have put on because it was. I still don't know if it was the previous year, but usually they sit there, and they get cracked after a year, dried out or something. It looked like it was the previous, so it could possibly been
Sure.
born the year before. I'm not sure, but yeah, that was a good story. That was a good hunt back in the day.
Dan knows a little something about being out there till midnight, don't you, Dan?
Oh yeah.
Maybe once or
I was,
twice.
I was thinking more about him losing his bow. Um, I had one hunt where I had been hunting like a month straight, like every day, just pounding it and working a full time job. When I was younger, you couldn't take off like I do now, and I was just beaten to death. You know how you get that burnout after 30 days of that crap. And we got into gun season, and I was going on like no sleep. And I take this long hike after work, and I'm racing to get to this tree, because it's a little later in the day.
Yeah.
I get to the tree, and I realize my tree stand isn't on my back. And I'm like, what the hell? I'm thinking how stupid I am for forgetting a tree stand. How do you forget a tree stand, So it's like, I don't know, probably 500-600 yards back to the truck.
Mhm.
So I just think I'm going to lean the gun against the tree, and I'm going to run back, get the tree stand, run back out here and get set up, because I'm pushing for time. So I start running back, and I'm running down this like logging road that goes through open area, and on one side it's heavy grass. And as I'm running, I see a rack of a really nice buck, and now I'm almost back to the truck, watching me, and I'm thinking, as I'm seeing this, like if I stop, that thing's gonna run. He's like locked on me. So I go in like a semicircle, and I run all the way back to the gun. I run all the way back out there and shot the damn thing. So it kind of reminded me of your story with the, losing your bow. At least you ran into a
Yeah.
good guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely could have just been gone forever.
One
Yeah.
thing I wanted to ask you was when you originally looked at that property,
Yeah.
what's the first thing that drew you to there?
So there was some private below on that windward side that they were going down to, and there was some thick stuff. So I think they were down there at night feeding, and there was some ag and stuff down, and I think they were just working their way back from the private, and you couldn't access because of the private. So it was a hike back to get to. So basically, I was trying to catch them
Mm-hmm.
coming back up in the timber in from that private, and it was hard to access.
Did you originally figure that out from a map?
No, from just driving the roads, you could see the private. Yeah, I didn't have any map, and I could see where the line was. They had it posted, and I'd scouted it in the summer, and I said, "Oh, they're down in this bottom, and they're going to work their way up when the acorns are good and be in the big timber. So
Sure.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get into buck number 3 here. This is your late season bow buck. I'm going to go ahead and let you start telling the story before I pull this picture up, since we only got the one photo here.
yeah, so that
What year
one,
was this?
that was another one that probably 15 years ago, somewhere, give or take. Um, that was from Pennsylvania. That was actually on a piece of private land. My buddy owned like a 40-acre. It was a hay field, and he had a little bit of timber on it, and he kind of let anybody hunt it. But in that area, there was nothing big, like 2-year-old deer, maybe a 120 deer. But this deer had found like a seam, a pocket that he lived and he survived. And like, if I would have told people I shot this in this area, nobody would have believed me, because nothing. But he learned how to live in that area and survive. I think it was a couple pieces of private across the road from my buddy's property that nobody would go, like the boundary of their property and the other property. There was like a seam that he lived up in for the most part. But anyways, I had permission to hunt my buddy's property, and he's not a big deer hunter. And another guy had told me, said, "Hey, there's a 13 point running around over there. I saw." This is the previous year to when, before I killed him, like January. A guy had told me, he said, "Man, I'm seeing this 13 point across the road over to your buddy's place." I said, "No shit." So I had gone out shed hunting. I didn't know what the deer looked like. This was like February now, and I'd found his left side, which was the typical side, and the other side had a lot of junk on it. It was actually bigger the previous year, had maybe 7, 8 points, 9 points on it. So I found the typical side, and I just did like huge circles trying to find the non-typical side, and I didn't even know what it was. So I didn't find it. So fast forward, that summer from when I found a shed, I had drawn an Iowa tag, a bow tag, and getting into October, like I worked all summer. I worked for another guy, but when hunting season comes, the guy knew, like, October, like, you're not going to see me till January as far as work. I worked hard all summer, but we had that agreement. So I had a bow tag for Iowa Zone 5, and my buddy had the same tag. So he was going out the first week of November, and we had like a Airbnb, I don't know, just a rental cabin or a hotel. I forget what we had, but I was going out. It was October. The frost hit. I'm working, and I told my boss, I'm like, I gotta leave. I can't be here. I was like, I'm not coming in tomorrow. You know what I mean? I gotta go. So I jumped in my Jeep. I had a Jeep Cherokee, and I had my dog, I had Border Collie. And I remember shooting a doe before I went out there and made jerky. I didn't have much money, but I was driving to Iowa the next day. And the buddy that we had a hotel with on the first week in November, I said, it was like mid October. I said, I'll get there and I'll do some scouting. I'll just sleep in my car and figure everything out. And we had maps, like, in like a folder of the different pieces of public, just printed out aerial photos from the DNR or whatever. Like, that's all we had. And I had like 7, 8 cameras, and I thought I was the man. I had like that many cameras. People were like, "Wow, you got 7 or 8 cameras? That's crazy. You're crazy," So I took my cameras, my dog, and my jerky, and I drove to Iowa, and I just lived in my vehicle and scouted, and they had an EHD hit that year, and I didn't want to, and I was hunting public, and I wasn't shooting anything unless it was a 170-inch deer. Like, that was my goal. So I said, "Man, and people were like, you're going to Iowa? How long are you going for?" I said, "Till I kill my deer." Like, I mean, people would like go for like a week or something or whatever during a rut. I was like,
Yeah.
"No, I'll be back. Whenever I kill my deer, I'll be back." So drove out there, did a lot of scouting, stayed in my car. And actually, the one night I was I actually was hunting a little bit, scouting a lot, and I come out of the woods, and there was a farmer there at my vehicle, and I talked to him, and he invited me to his house. It was right there by the state ground. talking to him, had a beer with him, and his wife come home and said, where are you staying at? I said, I'm just sleeping in my vehicle. She's like, she couldn't believe it, like she's like, where? I said, I'll just go up the road here and park and just sleep in my vehicle. She said, I'm not letting you do that. We got an extra room. You stay here. So I stayed with them that night, and I thanked them. And the next morning, she said, how long are you staying? I said, I don't have any plans of going. I'll be here till I kill a deer. Well, stop back, say hi. You need anything, come and see us. So went to hunting, and I found a big deer, and he was probably right at 170. And I passed up I found two other bucks that were like, I seen them at the same time in the same piece of state, well, 145-inch 10 and a 150-inch 8 point. And I could have shot them deer, but I was there for the long haul. And my buddy had come out, and I put him in that tree, and he shot the 145-inch 10. And so I ended up hunting that 170-inch deer, and I saw him 4 times from November till like December 15th. The first
Wow.
time I took a shot and I hit a limb and hit him down on his leg, like knee, and I didn't kill him. And the next time he got downwind of me, he smelled me. And one time he watched me, I was getting down out of my tree, picking my bow, or I was turned around, he's standing there watching me get down out of my tree. So he took off, and the last time was in December, and it was he come out of some thick CRP or whatever with a doe, and I shot at him, and I hit a sapling, and I gave up hunting that deer, right? But in the meantime, my my buddy was there for that week, and he had gone home, and I'm out there staying in my vehicle, and I went back and talked to the farmer, and he was harvesting, he was combining his fields, right? And he was driving. He had 2 semi trucks. He was hauling grain from like the fields back, and I said, "Hey, you want me to drive truck? I got a CDL. I'll help you." "No, you're hunting. Go hunting." I said, and he invited me to stay. You can stay here. You're going to hunt. I said, "Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll stay. It's getting kind of cold in my car, because I'm in December." And so I started living with him in the semis hauling corn. And then, like, my friends back home were like, "Have you seen John? Have you talked to him lately?" Where's I don't know, he's working for a farmer in Iowa. He's hauling corn. And I'll never forget the first time the farmer took me to the field. It was like 2 miles from his house, the farm, like where the grain bins are, and he showed me all the places where deer are and this and that. And like I said, we didn't have maps. He took me to the field, and I got in that semi, and I was driving back, and I was lost. I'm driving this corner. I'm driving all around Iowa, turning this truck around. I finally got back. He's like, "Where you been?" I said, "Man, I got lost. I was so worried about looking for deer and all the places you showed me that I couldn't get back to the farm." But I mean, it's a good story. I could probably this whole hunt out in Iowa that year. I could probably write a book on it because my car broke down. There was a lot to it, but I'm just giving you the short version of it. So I didn't end up like the last day. I think I shot and hit a 140-inch deer. I hit a limb and I stuck him in the neck. It was my worst season, like the 4 times with that 170-inch deer, and then shooting a deer in the neck, and it wasn't lethal. And I was just like, my confidence was so down. And I end up driving home one time and putting cameras out at my buddy's hayfield, that 40 acres here in Pennsylvania, maybe in November. And like I said, I went back out and I stayed there and hunted. And so fast forward to like January, I'm still out there hunting, and I end up shooting like a spike on the last day of the last day I was there in Iowa. And so I drove all the way home, and I wanted to hunt that spot and see if that buck made it back at my buddy's property. So I checked the cameras, and he was alive. He was still there. I got some daylight pictures of him. So as soon as I got back from Iowa, now it's January 8th, 10th, 12th, somewhere in there. I get back from Iowa, and in PA after Christmas, it's bow season and flintlock season. It's primitive. That's all you're allowed to use is bow or flintlock. And so I get back from Iowa, and I go get my flintlock at my house. I mean, I'm straight from Iowa to my house at Flintlock and straight to my buddy's field to hunt this deer, check the cameras, and he's there. And I remember it was kind of a windy, wind gusts, snowing, cold. And I remember like, man, I can't get out with this flintlock. That snow piles up and it'll get into your powder, your pan, and it won't shoot. So I said, I'll just sit in this hayfield here in my Jeep and I'll just kind of look across the road. Maybe I'll see that deer because I know he would live across the road. And he was crossing the road there and it was private across the road. I didn't have permission to hunt. And I just sitting in my Jeep and I'm looking with my binoculars across the road and looking like maybe 200 yards or some field and patches of timber, 400 yards or so. And I put my binoculars down and that buck standing right in front of my Jeep, and he was, and I was in that hayfield. So he went up into the timber and, I got out and I got my gun and here I forgot my pan powder, the 4F that goes in the pan. Right. So I wasn't even able to hunt. So it was windy and snowing and whatever. I went up to that timber and I could glass down through it and I see him. I couldn't even get close. He was like 200 yards down in the timber. So then I end up hunting him in that timber the next few days, or the next week. I don't know when it was, but it was like the last day was like January 24th. And here it was like the 22nd. And I hunted in that timber with my flintlock and there was acorns and he had come in out of that hayfield and he started eating acorns at 80 yards and I shot with the flintlock and the pan powder burned, but the gun didn't go off. It was just, and you just hold the gun and nothing, And I was just so down on like, I said, this is the worst season I've ever had. Like I've had opportunities and deer and just I was like, it's not going to happen. Like I got it gets into your brain, your confidence is gone where you believe that this ain't happening. But I don't give up. So there was 2 days left. So the next day I didn't take the flintlock and we had some snow on the ground. I took my bow and I got into timber, but where I could see in the hayfield and down to that road that they were crossing coming from that private. And this was pretty much my last hurrah. And even in the picture, like I didn't have no warm weather clothes. I had like a cotton jacket, like I would just sit and stand and move my toes and that. Like I hadn't have any good quality hunting gear. I couldn't afford it. But I remember sitting in a tree, but my mind was like, this isn't happening. But I gotta ride it out. I got today and tomorrow. And the last day was going to be like a blizzard, a whiteout. I was on the front end of it, but it's still windy and cold. And I'll never forget, I can look out in that hayfield and it was like damn near dark. I took my release off. I'm like tying my string on my bow, getting ready to drop it down. And I look and here come 2 buck. They come right up toward me through that hayfield and then they fed right by me. And I didn't even put my release back on. And meanwhile, these are the 2 little bucks that the big one hung with. Like chances are like he's going to.
Oh yeah, sure.
So.
Right.
But I was just so negative. I was just so beat down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right. And you always wait till they meander off before you get down out of the tree and leave. So I said, I'll wait. And I'm looking at him and I'm frozen. Hands, everything are frozen. And I look out in the field like, here he comes. And he's coming right on the tracks that them deer came. Right. And he's going to put them right at 8 yards. And so I had my release in my pocket. I had to get the bowstring and my hands are frozen. I get the string off. I get my release on my wrist. I didn't have any more time. Like I did in just enough time. I got an arrow on and I pulled back and I turned and I just waited for him to walk right by me. And I shot him at 8 yards. I just let him walk right into it. And I shot and he ran out there in the field and, he laid down and then I waited till dark and then I left and I come back and where he laid down, he just got up when I left and went in the woods and died. But yeah, I ended up harvesting that deer and got my buddies. When we got back, we got him out of the woods, and I had a climber then too, and I left my climber at the base of the tree, and like I said, got the deer, got out of there, and I said I'll come back in March. I'm done. Like I'll get my stand in March. I'm not worried about it. So yeah, I killed the deer and I go back in March. Well, I killed the deer and I called the farmer in Iowa and I sent him a picture this deer. He's like, "Oh, you're coming out here? Why you joking with me? Why you coming? You got them big bucks back home? Why?" Like, no, this don't happen. This is like a rare thing. Like they don't get like this where I hunt. Anyways, I went back in March to pull my stand, like reminisce a little bit, and I looked down behind me in that timber, and there's like a little bit of a ravine. Like where I'm standing, I'm at the head of it, but at 100 yards behind me, it starts to get like a little ravine, then it gets more pronounced to what was like maybe 10 feet down, 10 feet up. It was just open oaks. And so I got to stand down and I looked down that ravine behind me. I said, well, I'll take a walk down. Maybe I'll find a shed. And I'm at the head of that little drain, and I could see, looked like horns laying on top of each other down in that drain. I'm like, look, a deer lost both horns right on top of each other. So I start walking down there. Here it was his right side from the year before. He had so many points on it, like more than what's in the picture here. And he went down in that ravine, must have had that on his head, and there was a dead log, and he hit it off that dead log, and this horn was laying. So I finally found his horn the next spring. So that was pretty wild, like full circle. Like a lot happened there, like the year in Iowa and not having any luck and being down and end up killing this deer and finding his horn, the following spring. So that was pretty awesome. Memorable hunt.
Oh, for sure, 100%. Wow, that's and what a unique looking buck too. I mean,
Yeah.
the way his beams kind of come out, and then you got the G2, like just the different lengths, especially on his right side, is really kind of different. It almost, I guess that's probably just your jacket in the background. It almost looked like his one brow tine was curled over, but it looks like it's just kind of maybe an illusion there. But
Yeah, he got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He got 6 on that side, but the shed has like 2 more points on there. It was a lot bigger. Another one on a base or something. So he was maybe going downhill a little bit. But yeah, that was. And I showed people, and nobody bow hunted that time of year, and it was like no, like people were like, "Where'd you get that, Ohio?" I'm like, "No, I shot it. No, there's no deer around here like that. And you didn't get that here." I'm like, "Okay, whatever."
that's your Iowa buck.
Yeah, that's what I say. Yeah, you're right. I got him in Iowa. So
So, how long did you end up being in Iowa in total?
I was there from middle October till almost middle of January. Come home once.
Wow, that's
Worked for the
dedication, like to
farmer.
talk about.
I worked there, lived there, and I go out there now. I was just out there after I left the ATA show. I went and visited him. I drove
Oh
out
yeah,
to see him. I didn't get a tag this year, and since then I would stay. I stay with him. He lets me hunt on his land, but I'd rather go hunt the public land, and I just
sure.
stay with him. But yeah, become friends with him, and I go visit him, and now 15 years, 12, 14 years or something like that. I've known him, and
Yeah, that's one of the great things about hunting is those relationships, those random relationships.
yeah.
You run into a guy on public land, and next thing you know, you become hunting buddies. You know.
Yeah, it happens a lot too, because you're both doing the same thing, and
Hmm.
you have a lot of stories and stuff to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That was a good one. So, and I'm thinking like the whole time, I'm like, wait a second, I'm pretty sure this was a PA buck that he was talking about. I'm like, where is this going? Did he mistype something here about this one? I'm like,
Yeah,
because
it
I,
was just,
I mean, that looks like an Iowa buck.
it does, but it was like, man, it was just a whole year, all the opportunities, and it was just one of those years where, like I said, sitting in that tree when I killed that deer, I was so convinced that this ain't happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And my release was off. I'm like, but it's wild how hunting can do that to you. Put your mind in an area where could take over. And I tell people now, like, if you miss a deer or something happens, like, let it get to you for a short time, like,
Hmm.
dwell on it. But it's like you fall off a horse, but get up, dust yourself, and get back on. Don't let it overtake you. Where I think that year I did, but I've learned from that. I just try to be optimistic and think positive.
Right. I mean, and we've all been there plenty of times and gone through those trials and tribulations, and those dark days definitely they stick with you. Dan, I got to ask you, in your years of hunting, you've had to have gone through that. Do you still go through that from time to time where it just feels like everything is stacked against you, or is it easier for you to shake off these days?
I pretty much don't go through that anymore. I kind of embrace it. But when I was younger, it used to hit me hard. It used to bother me a lot if I went like a 30 days without killing or seeing a good buck. Now it just feels like that's just the process.
Yeah.
You put the work in, and it pays off when it pays off. Um, you know, One thing that caught me with this story, Johnny, is thinking back. Like when I don't have my heads at my house, I have them at a taxidermy shop. I
Hmm.
walk into the taxidermy shop and I stare at my heads,
Hmm.
and there's quite a few of them up there. And you look at them, and I look at a buck or two, and I'm like, "Wow, that's a nice buck. When the hell did I shoot that?" And I can't remember this. And it's like it takes a little bit.
Yeah.
You pull the mount down and look at what you got written on the back just to see, which buck is this,
Yeah.
and but there's certain bucks in that wall that you never forget. You know what I mean? You look at them and oh yeah, I remember that. I remember the story and stuff. And it's always the hardship bucks.
Yeah.
It's really when you get down to it, it's what you went through, you know. And that story reminded me of that. I got a buck one time. I think it was 1991. I think I hunted the whole season, just like every day, every morning, every evening. I was just obsessed with hunting, and I never got my buck. And then at the end, I had this, and back then there wasn't a lot of bucks to go around, like you said, a 2-year-old was a big buck. Well, this is like a 3-year-old, 11 pointer. It wasn't a huge buck in any regard. It just barely made Pope and Young, right? But it was a beautiful buck. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, it wasn't, when you look at my wall, it's not one that stands out, right?
Hmm.
But that buck, I shot that buck, and it was -20 without the wind chill. The
Oh,
wind
wow.
was relaxed, and it was the last day, last minute of the season when I
Hmm.
shot. And that one just sticks in my memory. And it was the hardship. You know what I mean? It really is just another buck, but you remember the ones that you earned. You know what I mean? The ones that you're off on a hunt, and some farmer comes up and says, "Hey, come hunt my farm. I got this big buck coming out in the field. And I don't hunt. Sit right in that tree." And you sit there and you shoot that buck. Those are the ones. Wow, I
Yeah.
got this huge buck. I can't even remember shooting it. And then, oh yeah, it's the farmer buck. You know, um, but the ones you earn, the ones that you got a relationship with and stuff, are the ones that stick out.
Yeah. If you work for it, it makes it that much better, And yeah, for sure. That's for sure.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on. We're moving on up the list, moving our way towards number one, and let's move on to buck number two here. This time I'll go ahead and bring the picture up right away here because people were chomping at the bit
Yeah,
on
you're
that
getting beat
last
up
one.
in the comments there.
Right. So buck number two, and I just have this one listed as the blizzard buck. Doesn't look like a blizzard at all.
Wow,
That
that's a
was
great picture.
that's that was last year. Um, so this was 2025 season. That was 2024 Pennsylvania. Um, and the first day of PA rifle is now the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So it was Saturday was the opener, and we had like a crusty, crunchy, terrible snow. But fast forward till Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, the following week, we're getting a blizzard. So I had places at my camps there, so I know the area. I have some deer that I want to hunt. Um, so I had a cameraman with me here on this hunt, and we had gone out Saturday, which was the first day of deer season. And I can't remember what we saw. We were kind of going after a certain deer, and there was a lot of hunters in that area. So we had gone to another spot. Um, I think it was the first day. My cameraman was with me and hiked up his drain, kind of looking for tracks, trying to get on a track, or just going to areas that I know in the winter that they'll start to feed. And with that snow, excuse me, they kind of get in them wintering areas out of the wind, maybe in some hemlocks, softwoods, and into some ferns and stuff like that. Just being in that area a while, I kind of know where they're at. So we went out, we were hiking all day, and we were kind of coming back toward the vehicle, and we ran into a nice wide 6 point. His one side was kind of messed up, but his left side was really nice and wide. I think he was maybe 21 inches wide. And we come around this point, we looked across the drain, and he was over there feeding with another buck. And I looked with my gun, maybe 150 yards away. I looked with my gun, and he just wasn't. He was thin. He just wasn't the deer I was looking for. I had all week. I had that blizzard coming, and I said to my cameraman, I said, Pete, I said, you want to shoot him? He said, I don't know. Let me look. And he put the gun up. He's like, well, I don't know. You sure you don't? You sure you don't want to shoot him? He's not. He's wide. He's a good buck. I was like, Nick, go ahead, shoot him. So he was able to, and he handed me the camera, and I don't know how to run the camera. So he had it set, and he said, just point it at the deer. So I pointed at the deer, and he shot it, and he had a follow-up shot. So it was nice. Pete went with me all year. It was nice for him, and he likes hunting, so he was filming with me all year. It was nice for him to actually hunt. He was excited about that. So I think we still had a few more days before that snowstorm. We were just kind of trying different areas. So we went to another spot the next day after we got his deer out, and it was right before dark. We actually posted. We just kind of sat on the ground where I knew kind of deer would winter and watched. It was so calm and quiet and crunchy, and we had these does come up, and they were feeding around us, and we couldn't move. And then last light, a nice 10 point came to about 120 yards. He was probably a 125-inch deer, and I'm looking for like a bigger deer. Um, but sometimes you got a cameraman, you want to get some footage. Um, Sometimes I go that route, be like, you on him? Can you see him? Well, let's shoot him. So, and it was freehand at about 120 yards. I was sitting in front of a big cherry, standing actually. We were kind of getting in position when them does come around us, so we couldn't move. And so I pulled my gun up freehand and clicked the safety off, and these does all took off down toward that buck. And I could see he's, 16, 17 inside, decent buck. I shoot, and as soon as I shoot, my crosshairs weren't even on the deer. I told Pete, I said, I wasn't steady enough, and it went right. I was over time. I missed that deer, which I was okay with because when we watched the film, he was a young deer with great genetics, good G1s, G4s. And I was like, phew, I'm glad I didn't kill that deer. That was a small deer with a great rack. Our deer up in that area, they get like in the 30 class eights, short brows, rare. Like it was a good genetic deer. And I think he was a 2 or 3 year old deer. I actually found that deer's horn there in that spring, and the neighbor guy killed it this year, and it was like a 145-inch deer.
Oh,
It
wow.
put some good mass on. It was the neighbor's son that doesn't hunt a lot, and he came up and sat in the woods, and the deer come by, and he shot, and I took the shed over to him, and I was like, man, that's the one I wanted to get away because he was really wide, man, great deer that we needed in that area to spread genetics. I said, but I'm glad you got it. Rather you shoot it than someone I don't know. And I gave him the shed. But anyways,
Very nice.
I was glad I missed that buck. Um, so the third day we went a little bit further north in PA. There was snow because uh, where I was, it was just a crunchy inch or so of snow, and they had about an hour north. And I just picked a spot on a map. We went tracking. Had about 8, 10 inches of snow, and just an east facing like finger ridge, yeah, finger ridge off this main ridge, and you know, I said, let's just looks like a good spot. And we hiked all the way up there, and it was just from picking a spot on a map. We hiked up there right to where I wanted to be, and there was actually a buck rubbing a tree, like on top of the snow. Like we walked up on him rubbing a tree. I was like, look at this, Pete. I said, man, right where I, wanted to go, and he had a decent track, at least a 3 year old. Um, so we had fun tracking that day, and we run him into a few other bucks and a bunch of blowdowns, and it got dark. So it was a great day of tracking in a new area. Um, when I get that snow, I like to get out and follow some tracks. So yeah, that was like midweek, and now we're getting to the blizzard when I shot this deer, which was Thursday morning. Um, Wednesday night didn't have much snow. It started to snow maybe around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I got out. I don't know, 3:30, 4 o'clock. I'm riding the roads, and I found a couple buck tracks, but I knew by daylight I wouldn't be able to take them as fast as the snow was coming down. So I had picked a spot, kind of easy to access, close to the road, and I actually knew about this buck. So daylight, I picked this spot because the previous gun season, we saw this buck in this spot. It was 364 days, almost a year to the date. And I was kind of saving this spot for when the time was right, 1 year, and when the snow was down from from the previous year where we saw him. We were actually putting a drive on. My buddy had a tag, and I was tagged out the previous year, and it was just a flat with like a little leeward hill, a little group of white pines, some deadfall in there, and I pushed it out the previous almost a year to the day. And that buck, I found his bed. There was an inch of snow. He was laying in some deadfall, and I seen where he ran. Didn't run toward my buddy, but he run out to the left, and I tracked him maybe 200 yards, and then I'd come back. I didn't get a look at him, but it was a big deer bed, big track. Didn't get a look at him. Finished the drive, and then the next day, uh, my buddy said, "Do you want to do that drive again?" I said, "I don't know. You think that deer will be there?" He said, "I mean, it worked for him then. I mean, maybe he'll still be in that bed." So the next day, we went in and put a drive on for that deer again, and the snow had melted. And now I had a guy out to the left where this buck run at 200 yards, and I had the same guy down below us, and we had two drivers, and we're walking, making noise, talking. We come across the flat, and we're coming down that leeward side, and we're talking just like this. I mean, making noise, talking, and I'm pointing up there. I said, "There's where he was yesterday." That buck stands up, looks over his shoulder, like, "Dang, you guys again?" And he just his gait, his hop was just like slow, like, "You guys are annoying me." Wasn't like, I think he knew, like, though running fast and that maybe gets him killed. But so he ran out to the left, and we could see him at 50 yards, just like if we had a gun, we could shoot him, but we were tagged out. And he ran out to the left, and I was waiting for a shot. And here, the deer ran out to the left, just out of sight, and hooked up behind us up on that flat because I ended up getting on his tracks in the wet leaves, right? And that was the last day of the season the previous year. So I knew that deer made it, and I knew I was waiting for this snowstorm. Um, Certain bucks I knew about, and this one was close to the road. So I said, I'm going to go in and see if this deer's there. So Pete went in with me, and we didn't take the big camera because it was snowing so bad. It was daylight. We went across that flat, and we started down that leeward little hill with them and white pines, and um, getting to where his bed was. I said, he just took the GoPro. He didn't have the big camera. So I said, "Get your camera ready. This is where he bedded." So we had gone down, and he wasn't bedded there. But like I said, now it's 364 days since I was last in there, and that's where he was last year. And I feel like that's where he wants to be. And so I said, "Well, we'll just do a little loop in here, like a little oval, go down, right, back to the left, and maybe a mile hike total, and back up to the vehicle. Maybe we'll catch a track or something." So he's following behind me and had the GoPro in his pocket. And we go down the hill. We're about 150 yards from where that bed was. And we're getting into more open timber, but with the snow and the stacking up on the trees in the blizzard like condition, you could really only see maybe 70 yards. Traditionally, you could see maybe 80 yards in there. It was just good, maybe 50, 60 you could see with the snow. So anyways, we're just walking in the open woods. Pete's right behind me. And to my left, that buck was laying just in the middle of the open woods, covered in snow, and he jumps up at 15 yards, and like it was wild. Like we were almost ready to walk past this buck, and he jumps up at 15 yards, and snow just goes everywhere, and he kind of runs out in the same gait, the same speed, the same like it triggered in my head like this is that buck, this is him, and he ran out to 50 yards, and he stood and he remembered us from last year, and that's probably why he wasn't in that bed, but he was close by. He's like,
Mm.
you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like they
Yeah.
knew that, and so he ran out there at 50 yards, and when I pulled up, my bolt got caught on my vest and lifted my bolt action up, and I pulled up and shot, and I could just barely see him there at 50, 60 yards. And the gun, since the bolt was up, didn't fire. And this is on YouTube, this whole hunt. So I pulled up to shoot and the gun didn't go off. And so I ejected that bullet. And here I'm putting another round in and my gun's jammed. So now I got to like take my eyes off the deer and look at the gun. And I just hope when I look back up that I can still see him, as thick as it is,
Yeah.
snow. And yeah, on the video, you can see I get the bullet in it and I pull up and I find I can see his head and his nose and his white patch. And he kind of like his hide and his brown kind of matched the trees. And I'm thinking in my head, like, I need to confirm this is him. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not just going to think I see a deer because it's white and brown out there and just be aimlessly shooting in the woods, because I got buck fever. So I look up and I'm like, yeah, that's him. His face, eyes, throat patch. And I just dropped down and over to his chest and I shot. And we could tell as soon as I hit, he got all hunched up. So that was a pretty memorable hunt, pretty awesome hunt. And like we were so pumped because we weren't really expecting that to happen, you know. And so Bo came and helped us get it out and hung it up. And the one picture, I think, at the camp there, I got my deer and Pete's deer hanging there. But yeah, it was pretty. And then I did have trail cam pictures of him about a mile away from, and he broke a little bit of his brow off. But he scored like 137 inch, but he's a perfect 8. And you look at him, and I heard somewhere a biologist say like the best rack for a deer to be dominant for fighting is like between 135 and 140 inch 8 point. So I think he was probably the dominant deer there, and he just like had them long tines. They were all facing in, and it kind of made sense to me. Like
Yeah.
probably the big guy. And I found his shed actually 2 years prior when maybe I'm thinking he was a 3-year-old. I didn't get this deer aged. I think he was around 5, but it was pretty awesome how that happened. It wasn't, like I said, I figured the deer I knew he was alive and I assumed he'd be there, but we didn't think it happened like that for him to jump up at, like if we would have not went another 10 feet, he probably would have let us walk by him.
Wow.
So that was pretty wild.
Yeah, I'd say so. And great job with the photos here too. I mean, just well done.
Yeah. Yeah, it was that was awesome. And I think I was in the woods for an hour by the time Bo got there. He had, the roads were bad. And I mean, the snow, the deer was covered. I think at daylight we had maybe 4 inches. And then by 11 o'clock when I got him out, I think we had like 11 inches. So it was just pouring down and it really wasn't good hunting condition. It was almost too bad. You had to kind of wait, maybe the snow stopped. So it was great that we had that happen like that. Cause it was wild that he jumped up. I wish we had that on video, him jumping up at 15 yards and just like that, like, holy shit, look at this, and I'm like flustered, but like trying to get my gun up.
Yeah.
But that was wild. It was a good hunt.
I noticed in that
Go ahead.
picture the buck size difference between the one that your cameraman got and the one you got seems to be quite a bit. Is that the picture, the way it looks, or is that
his was hung higher, but his was mine was definitely a lot bigger compared to his. His
it
was
almost looks like his had some potential, like it's a younger deer, right?
Yeah, it was a younger deer. He had a smaller body. He was definitely probably would have had.
Because the rack looks pretty big for the size animal it is.
Yeah, he was a big 6 point, big and wide. and yeah, a younger deer. He was rutted down. His neck was thin, probably 2 or 3,
Hmm.
But yeah, he was happy to get that deer. It was fun that we were tagged out there the first week of the season.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Dan, what has been your experience in heavy snowstorms like that? Have you had anything similar happen?
I don't know. For me, with the snowstorms, it's usually like once the snow is on the ground for a while, they get easy to hunt. The first snow, when it first falls, it's kind of a crapshoot, but you kind of I don't know, locate them easier and lock them down, and they kind of get into a routine after the snow's been on the ground for a while. Like right now, where they're still hunting, it's really easy. I
Yeah.
mean, I shouldn't say it's really easy. It's really easy to get on them. Hard to kill them at this time of the year with no leaves and the cold and stuff, but they're really easy to pick in this
They're
stuff.
predictable. Yeah, they get predictable to some degree.
And one thing I have noticed that rung a bell with Johnny's hunt is I have seen when you see a mature buck in an area, if he doesn't get shot, pretty much the timing, almost to the day, the
Yeah,
next year, you see him in the same spots. They have
yeah.
their routine for where they bed and where they move and where they feed and what they're feeding on. And you can see that pattern repeat itself year after year till you kill it.
Hmm.
All right, real good story, Johnny. Let's go ahead and move on to buck number 1 here.
So this was a hunt this year, and this was up in New Hampshire. I
Okay.
tracked deer and shot it. Um,
Yes, I was going to say this is a tracking job, isn't it?
yeah, and I do track around here. It's always fascinated me, and we don't get that many opportunities. I've done some late season, but anytime there's snow, I want to track, and I've learned a lot over the years. When I was younger, I used to just chase them, like I didn't know when to slow down, when to speed up, and I've learned that over the years. But so my buddy Connor that lives in New Hampshire, um, he's a younger guy, and he shed hunting. He's ate up with deer and tracking and archery hunting and everything, and we keep in touch a lot. And finally, we were able. I said I want to come up, and he wanted me to come up and do some tracking. I want to come up to the New England states and track. I haven't been up there, but we're kind of tentatively planning it this year, based on weather conditions. And right after Thanksgiving, our PA season started, which was the 29th this year of no, excuse me, November, that Saturday. And I told Connor, I said, why don't you come down, and we got a storm coming. We're going to have some snow. I got some spots you can do some tracking, get you on a deer. He was actually hunting in Maine, and he didn't have real good snow, and he jumped in his vehicle, and he he was up there, I think, Thanksgiving, and he drove all the way down. So first day, PA rifle. That Saturday, I sent him to an area, and he was able to get on a good track that morning. And I think he was walking up along the creek, and the deer crossed the creek, and it was just too high. It would have been over his boots. So he was kind of walking up the creek to find a spot to cross. And he looked up to his left, and here come his buck just coming down over the hill, wanting to cross a different buck coming down and wanting to cross the creek. So he was able to shoot that deer. I should have gave you a picture of that. It was a nice, maybe, I don't know, maybe a mid-20s, 9 point. He was tickled pink. So that was Saturday, first day of PA gun. And I end up hunting, not having much luck. And Sunday I hunted, and he hung out at camp, cut his deer up. And then he said, hey, we're getting snow in New Hampshire. Um, what do you think? Maybe we'll go up there. I said, that's a great idea. I said, because the snow's crunchy, and we're not getting more snow for another 4 or 5 days. I got 2 weeks of PA. I can come back here and hunt, finish the season out. I like the second week better. There's not as many guys in the woods in PA, and they'll start looking for does to some degree. So we jumped into his truck. drive up there. I rode with him. It was an 8-hour drive on Monday. Drove up to New Hampshire, and I called Enterprise up there, and I had a car for Tuesday morning, or a SUV. And so we got to his house Monday night, and Tuesday he took me to one of his areas that he hunts, and he actually filmed for me. He said, "I'll film for a couple of days, then I'm going to Massachusetts to hunt. I have a tag there." He was tagged out in New Hampshire, so he took me to an area where he knew there were some acorns, and we had a fresh powder. I don't know, 8 inches. And it was actually still snowing a little bit. Great, a little bit of a breeze, good tracking condition, and we were pulling some of his cameras that he had out from earlier in the year, and we got way up on top of the mountain, and we grabbed a camera, had a good deer on it, and we were kind of making our way back down. We probably did 6, 7 miles, and we were coming back down, and we were on this little point of these softwoods, and he saw a deer run out of it, right? And he saw a rack. He said, "Man, there goes a good buck." So we gave him about 20 minutes, and we get on his track, and the deer, I don't think actually got a good look at us, might have just heard us, or what. He wasn't too spooked. He went about 150 yards. He started slowing down, and we got on his track, and Connor's behind me with the camera, and we're going up the hill, and we're looking up the hill. And I've learned this from tracking deer. That's why it's nice to have another guy, if you have another set of eyes. Anytime you see his tracks going one direction, chances are if he's around, he's to the left or to the right. It just, I'd say 80% of the time.
Sure.
So I said, keep left and right, keep looking. And he looks to his left, and there's a deer. He said, "There's a doe here at 80 yards. And I pull my gun up, and I said, "No, that's a good buck. That's about 125, 130-inch deer or so." I said, "That's a shooter. It's standing there broadside at 80 yards. I can't see its head or its front leg. I get, because it was moving and it stopped, and I could just see its ass and his last rib." And I said to him, I said, "Are you on?" He said, I could see him with the camera." I said, "Well, let me see what I can do." And I shoot left-handed, but I can also shoot right. So I kind of couldn't move, but I was able to switch right-handed and kneel down, and I could get like his last rib. And with that 308, a ballistic point, I said, that'd be enough to kill him. And I said, "You on him?" He said, "Yeah." And I shot, and we thought for sure I hit the deer. It ran down the hill, and we were high-fiving. "Yeah, we got him. Did you see him run? His tail was all weird face. Like, I was like, "Yeah, we got him." So down there, we never hit the deer, and we followed him probably half, 3/4 of a mile, and he went back up on another point, bedded down, and that was that. So the next day, we had gone to another area, and the same thing. He had some cameras just in the forest from summer. He put them out in September, and he said, "There was a big deer here. It was a big 7 point last year. I got his sheds." And he had his sheds at the house. And he said, "He was in here last year in the winter." So we grabbed a couple of his cameras, and like 3 of them are dead. So we get to the last camera, and it had that big 7, which this year was an 8 point. And it's the one, I think I sent you the one. It was a trail cam photo of him. And so we called him the big 7. And that was like mid-November, early November. And he hasn't been on camera since. It was now December 2nd, 3rd. And we did a huge circle that day. And we were kind of heading back to the vehicle. Oh, and I forgot all about my rental car. Like, I was supposed to go and get it in the morning the day I missed that deer. But when you're in the woods, you're in the zone. I'm like, "Fuck that car. I don't care. I'm not worried about it."
Right.
So the following day, the same thing. He's like, "We got to get that car," because they called him and they were open till 3. And I said, I'm not worried about the car." He said, "Well, tomorrow I'm leaving. I'm going to Massachusetts. You're not going to have a vehicle." I said, I'm in a zone. I'm not worried about it." So, because he had that big deer on camera, and we did a big circle, and we were leaving, because we actually found that deer's track. And compared to what I see in Pennsylvania, I was like, "Holy shit, look at this track, Connor. Like, film this." And he's like, "I know, it's a big track." I'm like, "No, see it?" Because I didn't see that. Had a big old track, big wide stand, wide between them. So we followed him up into this rugged stuff, and it got late, it got dark. So we had left, and got back to his house. We did 12 miles that day. And he said, "What are you going to do about a vehicle tomorrow? I'm driving to Massachusetts to hunt. I'm not going to be here." I said, "I don't know. I'll just walk up the road and hunt." So that's what I did. I walked up the road and hunted all the way back behind his house, and then didn't do any good. And then the following day, he was going to be around, so he took me to get a rental, and all they had was a 2-wheel drive van. They gave away all the SUVs, and they got like 8 inches. I got to be careful where I park. So I got the van, and I said, "Man, I got." And the one thing I learned from hunting up there was the first day with all the snow, the blanket of snow, it looks like pristine, like there's nobody around. You got these huge mountains and all this forest, and there's just deer living and moving about as they do. But by the third day, I'd get on a buck track, and someone else would be in front of me to take it, or parking spots would be. You could see like there's hunting pressure there. It just brings me back into pressured whitetails. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, and one guy can go 8-10 miles. So you don't need a lot of guys in the woods. You just need them guys covering the ground. And when they're chasing, and them bucks know they're getting chased, it's like that's just as worse as having a woods full of hunters. So I started realizing that. I'm like, man. So I got that rental, and I said to Connor, I said, I got to get away from people. I was like, I don't like this. So he sent me to 2 spots, and there was guys. I was like, I didn't even get out. Like I'd have to go a mile. I'm like, and I said to him, I talked to him. I said, I didn't like them spots. I said, I'm going to go back over where that big deer was, that we followed up that mountain. And I hiked down low all around the mountain just to look for his track. And by now we're getting a lot of deer feeding down low in the softwoods and every night and tons of tracks. But I never seen that big deer come back down out of the forest. But I seen another guy's track in there. So anyways, the last day, the day I killed him, I said, I'm going to hike all the way up in that rugged stuff. I said, that's where he's at. It was like cliffs and rugged. And I think it was like about an hour and a half hike to get up in there. So, and now the wind is gone and we got still 6-8 inches of snow, but really calm out. My plan was to get up in that rugged stuff and maybe I'd catch him. I feel like that's just knowing how deer are pressured on public land, this and that. And I told Connor, I said, he's up there. He didn't come. That deer's. He has to me a small area that he's living in. You know what I mean? Like or area that he likes. And I went up there and it was just kind of a ridge. I walked and it was like this, and then there was like a knob, and then a saddle. And so I got right before that knob. I was getting up in there. It took me a while to get up in there. And the south slope was real rugged and steep with cliffs. And I had jumped the buck right before that knob, and he run down that south slope. And I figured since it was so calm, I'd let him go down the south slope and work maybe through them cliffs and that rocky stuff and below that knob at the saddle. And I decided to go to the north slope and kind of work all the way around and back to where that buck was in case I'd catch him. So that was my plan. It took me about an hour, and I went to the north slope all around that knob, and I'm heading back now. I dropped the pin where I jumped that deer, and I'm in some rugged stuff. But in my head, I'm like, this is where the old one, smart one wants to be. Nobody comes up here. And I just had my GoPro on my shoulder. I didn't have a cameraman then. So I'm walking through this rugged stuff, and I was about 100 some yards from where I jumped that buck. I'm coming back toward that track, and I'm looking down the hill. I could had some maybe 100 yard, 120 visibility through the forest. And I looked at one spot I hit. There's one lane. I looked down the mountain, and I said, "Is that a log lane there, or is that a deer?" So I pull my rifle up, and I look, and there's that big 7-point, which is an 8 this year that he had on camera, down below. He's just laying in his bed, and he had 13-inch G2s, and he's just laying there in his bed looking up at me. I was like, holy shit, that's that buck that, we were tracking that came up in here. And I turned my GoPro on. I had to go 10 feet to get to a spruce tree. And I get to that spruce tree and there's a Y, and I put my gun up on the Y, but it was too steep of a shot. And I take my gun off the Y and I kneel down, and it's like a 3-inch diameter spruce tree. And I get my gun, use that spruce tree for a rest. And I just told myself, hurry up, but take your time. So, like, that's what was going through my head. And that deer was just laying in his bed and looking at me. And I don't think he's ever seen anybody up in that rugged stuff. And to me, that was like home base. Like when you were a kid, you played tag, you got to go to base. Like that was his,
Ghoul.
like that's where there was
Yeah.
nowhere else for him to go. Like I'm safe here. Like he held on to that spot. Like that's how my analogy is like, and he knows if he does get bumped, someone's going to chase him. And he just held on to that spot and he just was hoping I'd walk by. And so I was able to get one shot at him, jumped up out of his bed, and he ran at 20 yards. I saw him again, like before he went out of sight. And you could see after he jumped up, his bed was just brown, bare, like there was no snow in it. Like he literally lived there. And so I waited 20 minutes and like I didn't know because I just missed a deer a couple days earlier that I thought I killed. And this one I was shooting through some thick stuff and trees in the way and stuff, and waited 20 minutes and I hiked down, and at 40, 50 yards, I pulled my binoculars up and I could see what I thought was like a tuft of brown hair. And, but I wasn't this, I was kind of being a pessimist. I'm pretty optimistic, but I don't want to, yeah, I got him, you know? So I got another 10 yards closer and I looked and I was like, in my binoculars, I said, that's brown hair. Oh man, that's a good sign. So I get to his bed. I don't see any bullet marks, anything. And I find one little speck of blood, and I see his tracks leaving the bed, and he looked like he had a leg maybe dragging. I'm like, man, maybe I broke his leg. I'm not thinking, like I said, what's the worst case scenario? But his legs were probably tucked under him if he was bedded. So I started on his trail, and I went up to that 20, 25-yard mark where I'd last seen him before he went down the hill. And I saw where at 20, 25 yards was next blood was coming out of his mouth, the spray. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, that's good sign. That's awesome.
Right.
As soon as I saw it, I looked to the right. He's laying there. I'm like, holy shit, there he is. I can't believe it. I can't, when I was way up on that mountain, I was just, and what it was, his ass was facing me. He was like a C, like curled up, like his hind quarter and his head was away from me, looking back over his ass, looking back over his hind quarter up the hill. So the bullet actually went in his ham, out of his ham, and grazed up along his ribs, but lodged up in his chest. I was able to retrieve the slug out of his chest. But yeah, so like when he ran, I think his back leg was maybe dragging a little bit, but that was wild. Like I called Connor. I was like, dude, I shot that big 8 or that 7. He's like, no way. I'm like, yeah, man. He was up in that rugged stuff where I figured he was. Well, we tracked him. We tracked him the couple days earlier, and we left off 300 yards. And I think he just lived up in them cliffs and that. And so,
Sure.
and I couldn't. And he told me how to, because I couldn't get back up the mountain and over down to my car. So he said, don't go all the way down to the creek and out. It's a swamp. I was like, man. So I sat there for an hour and a half with that deer, like on his mountain, just like in awe. He had a hole in his face, a hole in his neck, scars all the way down his neck, a hole in his top of his head, his pus. Like he was the king of that mountain. Like literally, he fought to live there and have that spot. And it was just, I was in awe. Like I sat there with him for an hour and a half, like just sitting there way up high in that elevation. It was pretty sick. And I said, man, I better get, and I think I was also kind of dreading the drag out, So that's another reason I sat there, but it took me 6.5 hours to get him out. It was dark, got him to end up in a swamp somewhere. My phone died, and luckily I was only a few hundred yards from the road, and by then Connor was back from Massachusetts. It was about 8 o'clock at night, and we were able to retrieve him out of that swamp, and I drug a lot of hair off the one side. But you have to, in New Hampshire, if you do pack them out, you have to take the carcass and everything into the check station. So I just, and he weighed 176 pounds, which they said maybe in October he'd be in the 210 range, uh,
Sure.
field dressed. But yeah, it was an awesome hunt, man. It was probably
What'd those G2s measure at?
that one was 13 and a half, and I don't know what the one on this near side was, maybe 12 or so, but
Yeah. Wow.
the just the frame of the rack compared to of the other deer I shot this year was just there's no comparison. And when I went up there, Connor had a few bucks on his wall, and I told him, I said, "Man, your taxidermist is using the wrong form. Your heads are too big. They look like donkey heads, like something not in proportion." And he said, "No, I use the best taxidermist in New England. When they get this a certain age here, the species gets this big donkey head, this big head, and I call it a donkey head, you know." So really the head on this animal, like compared to a deer in PA, like there's really not a huge comparison. This head's a lot bigger. So I did, Scott, send you that one picture. I had the jawbone taken out of this deer. I'm going to age him. And you can see here in the picture, he's the one on the left, and then the other two jawbones are 5.5-year-old deer. One was in Ohio and one was West Virginia, like legit mature bucks, heavy deer. But just look
Mhm.
at all the other this deer, like, and he had the skull that matched that jawbone. It was an inch and a half taller than those other jawbones. So like the rack,
Yeah, that's crazy looking. I mean, the
wow, the
difference.
rack, yeah, is so with that big of a head, though, rack don't look as big, but he scored in like 142, is barely an 8 point, but it's just a massive frame, a big deer, and I shot it up there in New Hampshire and tracking and what I've been wanting to do, you know. So that was probably one of my best hunts ever, really, to harvest that deer in that area with not many deer and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's a great story. Yeah, I'm really perplexed at like how high that jawbone goes up
yeah,
there
it's
compared to
wild.
the other two, and the age difference. What? Could you repeat that again? Like, what was the
So
age difference between these
the
three?
other two smaller ones are, I mean, I didn't get them aged, but I'd say they're 5.5-year-old deer. Uh,
Okay. Wow.
one's from Ohio, one's from West Virginia, and then we think this one in New Hampshire was at least 7.5 based on history, trail cam pictures and stuff of him. I didn't send them out yet. It might be 8. He had a lot of wear on that, and honestly, I don't know if maybe next year he probably someone would have taken over his spot. I mean, he was getting to that age where he might step down, but that was his spot up there. That's where he lived, and he fought to keep that spot.
Right. Right. Wow. Well, fantastic stories to say the least.
Yeah.
Dan, you have anything to add to that last one?
No, I think he said it all.
No, I mean, honestly, Johnny, fantastic stories. I'm glad you picked the five that you did because there was just so much to tell in each one of those stories. Going back to like what you went through for better than 3 months in Iowa and killing a spike to what
Yeah.
you end up killing back home again. I mean, these are great stories, and I like the fact that several of these stories are in your home state of Pennsylvania. It's not like, oh, I got my best bucks or some of my favorite bucks are all over the place. Some of these, or the vast majority, I guess, right? Three of them
Yeah. Two of them. Three of
or
them.
two,
Yeah.
three
Three
of
of them.
them
Mm-hmm.
are right in your home state,
Yeah.
and I feel like a lot of times PA gets a bad rap. You know what I'm saying in terms of, wow, we don't have the bucks of great caliber or PA is super hard to hunt. I think every state, every state, every area you go in, you're going to have a level of that of self-deprecation or from the hunters in that area where it's like, in terms of like, it's super hard to hunt in my state. Or we don't have the
Yeah.
caliber of bucks in my state that you have in your state or in that state and that, it's a reoccurring theme.
Yeah.
I feel like, so for you to showcase some of the great bucks that you've killed in PA is fantastic. It's much appreciated. And I think the people who are watching that are from that area probably appreciate you showcasing them as well.
I think there's good deer in most states. I mean, there's a lot of states with good deer. You just got to find them, and you know,
Yeah,
I,
PA
I
is a great place to hunt.
yeah. I mean, and I stick to like. I'm fortunate that where I live in Pittsburgh, I hit Ohio easily, West Virginia, Maryland, and PA. Like I got, and over the past few years, I would stick to them states because they're here, easy to access. Then I can venture out maybe late season or take like an out of state hunt, like a little further out to where I don't have much intel. But I just build on areas year after year, add to them and check new spots. And I think one thing with me doing it so long, I think about like the success I had this year. It's like I've been to a lot of states. I got a lot of spots in my back pocket, or like I've been there maybe 5 years ago. Let me go. It's just like I've hiked so much. I spent so much time, over the years in the woods that I have a lot of good areas in mind that I could, draw from. That's one good thing about having a lot of experience, and instead of just learning from podcasts or other people, like boots on the ground all those years, you can find those locations to help you.
What I was going to say is what I'm impressed by this podcast is that you're a well-rounded hunter. Most guys we talk to, like they're like a tracker or they're a farm hunter, or we're listening to your stories. Your top 5 hunts were very varied. I mean, from tracking to um, farmland to your hills and back home. You go wherever it takes to get on deer. And I think not only that is that cool that you're a well-rounded hunter, but that's what makes you an even better hunter by getting outside of your comfort zone. A guy that like you get a lot of guys, and I'm sure you've seen this, Johnny, um, that come from some place that's really great, or they're on some really great farm their family owns or something, and they kill a giant buck every year, and they think they're a great hunter.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying they're not, but I'm saying they probably are not learning much going to the same 5 stands year after year, season after season, killing deer in the exact same scenario.
Right.
As soon as you start venturing out, like a guy will think he's a great hunter that comes from like Iowa or something, and hear that Wisconsin has bigger bucks, and then they come and they hit the big woods in Wisconsin and try to figure that out. You know, it's a whole different ball game, and if you haven't done it, it's hard. But I think that want that we discussed earlier, that you have in you, that desire to go after them, probably puts some challenge in you too. Like, I want to go in, I want to kill one in that area, I want to learn this, I want to figure that thing out, and that's what drives you to be a better hunter.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Real quick, in terms of PA, and I think this is maybe what Racer Dave is asking here. Do you primarily hunt mountains? What other terrains do you hunt? And what would you like to hunt that you haven't? I mean, obviously, when you're hunting in Iowa versus PA, the terrain's obviously going to automatically be different there in a lot of ways. But I'll let you go ahead and.
Yeah, most of my hunting is anymore mountainous, east coast, West Virginia, Maryland, PA, up into New Hampshire. I think, and I've hunted the Midwest, down south some, and enough terrain and habitat where I've done, I think, most of what the deer in the United States live in. So there's not any other spot that I think I'm wanting to like experience. and people always ask me, what state do you like hunting in? I said, whatever state I'm in, so that's
In that moment, yeah,
thing,
sure.
but I do enjoy the mountains I like the vastness, like areas that when I was young in Pennsylvania, to me, a young kid was so, even where I grew up, just across the street from my house was 1,000 acres, and that was so vast. Then I outgrew that, and then northern PA, I would almost like not know and unwrap the present you got under the Christmas tree. Like you don't know what you got. Then you get to the point where you know it. Like I like not knowing an area, but like it was nice to go to New Hampshire, and I'm going to go back and shed hunt. It's vast there, and I like not knowing what's there. And then you start, like I said, running cameras and talking to people and finding sheds, and you almost not figure it out, but you learn the area. So I just like going to new areas, and I've started more in West Virginia. There's a lot of land down there, a lot of rugged land that don't see a lot of pressure, and I just like going to new areas and I think with the terrain, it keeps some people away. So I like going to areas like that to explore and just figure out a new area.
Very good. Well, Johnny, we appreciate you joining us here tonight. Again, your stories were fantastic, and we hope to have you back on again soon. And do you have any plans? What's coming up for you? Where can people find you?
So yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram, the Johnny Stewart, and my YouTube channel. This is my third year with that, and we're working on the New Hampshire one now. Um, there's a couple. Go check it out. I got some hunts from this year. North Dakota, Ohio, West Virginia, and we're working on that New Hampshire one, and then I got a PA one that's coming out. So yeah, check that out, and I appreciate you having me, Scott. Thanks. Nice talking to you again, Dan. I appreciate it, and
Thanks for coming on.
yeah.
Are you going to be at any other shows or anything like that? Are you going to be
Yeah, I'm
heading
going to
up
be
to
at the
any of the trade shows or expos or anything like that
Yeah,
people might run into you?
I know for sure I'm going to be in Harrisburg at the Great American Outdoor Show on the two
Okay.
weekends. It's the 6th and 7th, and I think again on the 14th or 13th. But that for sure, and then that might do a few more, but that's just the next one I'm going to be at.
Sure. Awesome. All right, Johnny, thanks again for joining us tonight.
I appreciate it.
All right, Dan, that was good. That was great. Johnny,
Yeah.
glad to get back into the top 5 again. I mean, not that we're going to do them constantly week after week, but it's nice to throw those in and kind of mix that in. I think obviously as we get into the off season, if you will, we'll probably do some more of those. So, yeah, I don't know. You got any other thoughts, Dan?
No, that was a pretty good podcast. I mean, usually I'm asking questions about terrain and stuff when we have guests on with the top 5. But Johnny covered his hunts really well.
Yeah, he did. He really went into detail explaining everything.
I could envision everything he was doing, so I really didn't have any questions. Yeah.
I agree, 100%. So,
Yeah, he's a great hunter.
I guess one last thing we could quick bring up here is there's still a few openings available for the February scouting workshops that Dan has going on Saturday, February 7th and Sunday, February 8th. And then 2 weeks later, again, Saturday, February 21st and Sunday, February 22nd. Dan, where can they get signed up?
Yeah, if anybody wants to go or they want more information, just send me an email, a text, private message on Facebook, however you got to get a hold of me.
Very good. All right. We'll be back next week, right, Dan?
Yep.
I don't see any reason why not, right?
As long as I'm still alive.
Yeah. So we'll do a show next week, and then next weekend already, right? Next weekend will be the first workshop. So
Yeah, it's coming up quick.
yeah, that's good. Let's get through this winter here as quickly as possible because this polar vortex has not been a whole lot of fun. But all right, thanks guys for tuning in. We'll see you again next week. Don't forget to subscribe and like, as always. We'll see you next time.